Our first speaker is Professor Giorgia Bulli. Giorgia Bulli is an assistant professor in political communication and discourse analysis in the Department of Political Science and Social Science at the University of Florence. She was the co-coordinator of the Interdisciplinary Research Unit on Migration at the University of Florence and has served as the General Scientific Coordinator of inter-university research projects funded by the European Commission. Professor Bulli is the author of many publications that examine right-wing and anti-immigration parties and movements. Many of these works, published in English, unravel the intricacies of the complex right-wing politics in Italy for international audiences. Most recently, for example, comes an important book about the outsized political impact of the neo-fascist fringe party, Casa Pound Italia, which was written together with Caterina Froio, Pietro Castelli Gattinara, and Matteo Albanese, and published by Routledge in 2020. Professor Bulli is also working, I think it's something Marla just mentioned, to shape the very process of doing research in these charged fields, as we see in a 2018 piece titled Strategie di ricerca sull'estrema destra in Italia e in Germania. She frequently works in a comparative context, having published on the German anti-Islamicist movement, Pegida, and her talk today is in this comparatist vein. It's titled Mainstreaming or Legitimation of Political Violence, Examples from Italy and Germany. Please join me in welcoming Professor Bulli to the podium.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I cannot start. Thank you. And meanwhile, let me say you how happy I am to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you very much for having this fantastic conference in presence. Being the first speaker, I feel... Yeah. I'm really very honored of opening up this discussion. And as soon as I discovered that I would be the first speaker, I said to myself that I would present the research on Italy and on Germany about the development of right-wing extremism. But I would also like to give a look to how my comparative research can stimulate the discussion, not only from a political science point of view, which is my normal topic of research, but also taking into consideration other perspectives. And these perspectives are cultural perspectives and a perspective that has to do with a kind of a aestheticization of violence, which we will see is a very big important part of how today right-wing extremist parties and movements present themselves and make it possible to have a kind of mainstreamization, or we will see legitimation of political violence. So what I am going to present is a reference to pervasive violence in fascism, to fascism and to political violence in political and non-political settings, use of hate speech as a communication logic, and the adoption of symbolic and linguistic violence in political communication. Acted violence in institutional and non-institutional environments in order to ask ourselves if we are witnessing a mainstreaming or a legitimation of political violence, and how can mainstreaming and legitimation be understood from an empirical point of view. Examples from my research from Italy and Germany will help me to conclude it, to arrive to concluding remarks. My main argument, I would like to point it out immediately, Because in my presentation, I would like to offer a broad overview of the concept of mainstreaming and legitimation of violence, starting from the Italian and German case. I highlight the centrality of political phenomena such as the evolution of the party system, the role of political cultures, the opportunity structure for the extreme right, and the related increase of space for the acted and symbolic representation of violence. But in parallel, I would also like to show how this process of mainstreaming and legitimation, the role of cultural consumption, passion, and lifestyle are also important. So, Italy and Germany as reasons for the comparison. There are lots of reasons why a comparison between Italy and Germany makes sense. And of course, these are two cases where the authoritarian and totalitarian past have been differently approached when in the rebirth of the democracy, the Entnazifizierung in Germany, the Epurazione, so the way that the rebirth of and the transition to democracy was interpreted are different. There are different evolution of the party systems. I don't want to go into big details, but in the Italian party system, the post-fascist party of the Movimento Sociale Italiano has always existed, whereas we have to wait until a very recent past if we see the legitimation in parliament of a far-right party in Germany with the party of the Alternative for Deutschland. And then the different investment in the prevention of right-wing extremism, anti-Semitism, racism. I show here a picture. There is a big investment in Germany in order to prevent events of racism, and in the research, 35 million euros in Germany, whereas it is impossible to find also data on that kind of investment in Italy. On the other side, there are converging patterns of extra-parliamentary development in the extreme right in both countries, converging partners of strategic convergence between the extreme right and populist parties and movements, and converging partners of political and cultural development of the extreme right and reference to political violence. So I focus on three case studies: that the part of the Northern League, the movement of Casa Pound Italia, which is an extreme right movement, and the social movement of Pegida. These are three different cases. The Northern League is now the oldest party in Italian parliament. It was born as a localist populist party. Now it has become one of the big representatives of radical right populist parties in Europe. Casa Pound Italy is a very interesting example of a social movement. They declare themselves being representatives of the third fascist wave, so to say, of the fascist of the third millennium, and they are very active also in the political communication and also in creating a landscape where political violence has a big role. And then Pegida, it is still a social movement of the radical right. It makes its manifestations on every Monday in the city of Dresden, and they call themselves patriots against the Islamization of Western Europe. So these are three different cases, and the three cases adopt political violence in a different way, and I will show you now how. As you can see from the pictures, violence is there in the ways that these parties and movements describe themselves. The first picture is the picture of one demonstration of Pegida. It is, of course, an anti-immigration movement, and refugees are not welcome. And the picture really shows how the invitation to violence is legitimate in this kind of picture. Whereas when someone goes to the demonstrations of Pegida, the leaders of the movement made it clear they don't want to see any kind of violence in their demonstrations. And I can say it because the method that I decided to use in order to study these partisan movements is an ethnographic approach. That is, I go to the manifestations, I talk also together with colleagues, like for example, the colleagues with them I made the research on Casa Pound. And in order to understand what are the reasons why they join the movement, sometimes they leave the movement. And so I am been present to most of these demonstrations, and I have talked to the leaders and to the members in order to understand what drives them to political action, a political action that also includes violence. The second picture is the picture of Casa Pound. It is the white and black, and you can see that the representation is a stereotypical representation of the hierarchical principle in front of the seat of Casa Pound, which is here in Rome at the Esquilino, and the idea and this kind of aesthetization of the hierarchy and the political violence is always there in all the representation of Casa Pound Italia. And then Matteo Salvini is the leader of the Lega Stop Invasion, which is a recurrent opus in many of these parties and movements. But as I said, there is not only political science, we should go beyond political science in order to understand what are the reasons that drive, as I said, members to participate. And there is a literature which is made not only of electoral results, but also of written texts that become important texts for this kind of audience and of membership. These are two of these texts, the memoirs of a former neo-Nazi. This is a very well-known figure in the extreme right scene of the early 90s in Germany. And reading these books makes you understand how, for example, for the author who was born in the Republic of Germany, Eastern Republic of Germany, being a Nazi and making using of violence meant the creation of his own identity. So I would say it is important to combine the typical ways of making research to political science and this other kind of literature in a landscape where the acts of political violence grow and grow, because this is the representation of death victims of right-wing extremism violence from the early 90s until today. And we can see that the acts based on political violence perpetrated by extreme right members are growing, and it is hard to understand if they are made by singles or by bigger organizations. The use of the communication logic is always present also in the ways that these parties and movements represent themselves. This is the frequently asked question of Casa Pound, where they respond to the question, is Casa Pound Italy a violent movement? And the answer, which you can find in the first web page, is Casa Pound Italia is politics, not hooliganism. It is not interested in showing muscle. It wants quiet strength, but at the same time, it cannot allow anyone to challenge its legitimacy to act and to exist. We want confrontation, but we do not reject clash if it is imposed on us, and our political and physical survival depends on it. So the way that violence is referred to is very clear, and it's intrinsic from one side and explicit from the other side, and it is represented as a means of survival in an hostile political environment. At the same time, as I said, a movement like the one of Pegida in Germany explicitly states not to use violence in all the demonstrations they organize. But if you look at the symbols, the first symbol is the official symbol where violence is is rejected, but on the other side, the symbols that the movement uses and the slogans they use contain violence. But at the same time, violence is expressed in a community environment where the motto is "Wir sind das Volk," we are the people. So there is a combination of violence and reference to the people in the clear understanding of populism, right-wing populism. Again, death violence, violence in Germany brings to death. This is Walter Lübcke, who was assassinated in 2019, and it is the first assassination of a politician in Germany that was motivated by right-wing extremism. I think Andrea Mamone will speak about this, about the assault on the TGL of in Rome in October. I have the video, but I think that Andrea will show the pictures. What is interesting in our understanding of legitimation and mainstreaming is the subsequent parliamentary debate. This is the parliamentary debate from extract from the parliamentary debate. And this is Giorgia Meloni speaking, the leader of the party Fratelli d'Italia. She uses two strategies. One strategy is the reversal of the meaning, and the other one is the reconceptualization. In the first abstract, you can see the scenes of 7 officers, 7 left to take a beating in front of the TGL headquarters are unworthy. It is offensive to people who want to demonstrate peacefully against your government, and it is offensive to this parliament, which is not made up of imbeciles, Minister Lamorgese, and she's talking to the Minister of Interior. So this kind of language and the reversal of the meaning, because Fratelli d'Italia was accused of having linkages with a party which is Forza Nuova, who made the assault on the CGL, is a typical example of the use of violence in an institutional environment. Another strategy is the recontextualization, and that takes us back to the darkest years of Italian history. It was calculation. We are back to the strategy of tension, where strategy of tensions, everybody knows, is happened in another political period and had to do with the involvement of the state in facts of violence. So this use, the political discourse also made at the level of institutions also has a big role in this process of mainstreaming and legitimation of political violence. The response of the Minister of the Interior, Lamorgese, has 2 other strategies. One strategy is the formalization of responsibilities, and then another one is a focus shifting. In the first of these abstracts, it's written down, it is clear that it was not possible to contain all the criminal intentions behind the violent part of the demonstration, especially those instigated by the most politicized elements, and as a result of which there was a serious disturbance of public order. And we're talking about the assault on the seat of the trade unions, and the images are clear about the use of violence. Another strategy is a focus shifting. The Rome Initiative saw, as you know, a mixed participation in the initiative, heterogeneous in the initiative, alongside the representatives of political groups and political movements belonging to the radical right, the galaxy of the antagonist left, and the anarchist component. And so there is a shifting of the focus, which was the attack perpetrated by an extreme right party to trade unions. So in this complicated landscape of interplay between institutional and non-institutional settings, media can be represented as friends as foes. Here I selected 2 kinds of media. One is the journal Compact, which is distributed at the Pegida manifestations. You can buy it everywhere in Germany, and it contains references to violence, reference to radical right ideologies. And the other publication is the Blaue Narcisse, and it is the voice of the new right, of the so-called new right. these cultural productions are really very widespread in Germany, in Italy, and in Europe, and they are the seat of understanding of politics by these right-wing extremists, and there is a broad circulation of these journals and of the ideas that are contained there. Another example, this is the publisher Altaforte, who was, maybe some of you know, excluded from the book fair in Turin in 2019 because of the publication of right-wing, extreme right-wing, radical right books. And of course, there was a big debate on the very fact that this publisher was excluded from the book fair in Turin. And the other example is Il Primato Nazionale, which is the newspaper which can be linked to Casa Pound, but that invites many famous journalists to write, and it has a very big circulation. So the landscape is made also more complicated by the very fact that, as I said, there is not only political journals, political manifestation, political demonstration, where the use of violence is clear and it is debated in institutional settings, but violence also passes through mass consumption and pre-identification in clothing, music, tattoos, lifestyle, codes of conduct, linguistic appropriation. There is broad literature on that. One of the best books, or at least one of the books that opened up this kind of discussion, is the one of Cinzia Idris in 2018 on the extreme right going mainstream, even through the clothing, music, and lifestyle of the members who make use of it. There is also symbolic hybridization. If you look at the way that these parties and movements represent themselves and the novelty in the practices of political communication, you can see that symbols of the left are taken as symbols of the extreme right also. This is Che Guevara in Casa Pound, Italia. What is interesting is in Germany, the Autonome Nationalisten, which is an extreme right group, also make use of the symbol, which is the symbol of the Antifa, that is the symbol of the Antifa in different colors. So there is a symbolic hybridization which is very visible in all these elements and in all these ideas of cultural production, and talking to the people who are members of this partisan movement, it is clear that the old categories of right and left are somehow not really abandoned, but are not very important as they were in the past. And this kind of symbology and this kind of production of communication, which is different from the communication that was used until some decades ago, is a means for recruitment, together with other means of recruitment, which have to do, for example, with the music scene. One of the biggest elements and one of the biggest landscape for recruitment of new members of extreme right movements that sometimes are also active in the field of violence is music. This is testified by many studies. This is also testified by the German Verfassungsgericht that also always publish studies and research on that. The number of concerts where bands from all over Europe meet themselves is growing. Music has always been, in the last decades, not only a means of recruitment, but also a means to funding for these partisan movements. And these are landscapes and these are environments where the institutional debate on violence is not present. But if you listen to the music, if you read the text of these songs, it is clear that this is a very important means of communication where violence is always present, and interviews that I have been making with young people testify that being in concerts like international events like this means a first step into the political socialization of these members, with the danger that these movements radicalize themselves. Lifestyle, this is my concluding slide. Lifestyle is represented also in the political communication of political violence. In the first slide, in the first image, Casa Pound Italia, fighting is a destiny. And here, the use of the images is very clear, and the idea that members of Casa Pound should understand the fight as a destiny is present in all political communication of the movement. As well as in Pegida, no songs with lyrics full of hate, it is written down in this advertisement. Pegida sings and Dresden shows how it works, because all the demonstrations of Pegida start with singing together, like this creation of the community, and the speakers of the movement make it clear that they don't want to use any violence, but then the slogans that you hear are violent slogans. And to conclude, mainstreaming of political violence passes through different political institutional forms. Parties, movements, institutions are only one part of mainstreaming of contemporary political violence. There is a clear convergence between the extreme right and populist parties and movements like, for example, between the Lega and Casa Pound, or Pegida, or and the Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative für Germany. Traditional mass media, together with mass media linked to the extreme right culture, grant high resonance to the appeal of political violence. And political violence is not only a political means of confrontation, it is also an essential component of cultural products, lifestyle, identity assets of the extreme right and radical right political subcultures. And this interplay really makes it very difficult not only to follow the evolution of political discourse, which is based on political violence, but also to understand where is the border between the use of political violence in a clear and understandable way, and where political violence also passes through institutional settings, as in the case that I showed about the parliamentary debate that followed the attack on the seat of the CGL trade unions. Thank you.